Hi, I'm Danielle Malin from Spirit's Voice, and today I'm joined by an incredible medium by the name of Byng. Now, can we find out a little bit more about you, and can you tell us how you're introduced to mediumship?
It really began, I had lots of different spiritual experiences growing up, but it's my sort of, like, if you want to call it that awakening, that kind of calling to mediumship happened in 2004 when I was 18. And at that time I left school and I started a new job in a place about 2 hours north of where I was born, in Sheffield, and I moved there to start a new life for myself. And to cut a long story short, it all fell apart quite quickly, but I stuck it out and I stayed for 2 years. And during that 2-year period in Sheffield, I didn't really have many friends there because I was new, and my work meant that I was traveling to different places. And really, to kind of fill the time, and there's a lot of time by myself, I happened upon a small Buddhist centre just up the road from where I was living, and I started with meditation first. And I was meditating an hour a day, Monday to Friday, and 2 hours a day, like 1 hour twice a day, Saturday and Sunday. And over, I'd say, a good 12-month period, I really started to build an honest and an open relationship with myself. Through that meditation practice, I was going back through different experiences that I'd faced up until that, in that 18-year period of my life, and was really having to get to know myself and heal from some of those things, but also recognizing the qualities that were there within. And I remember it because it was quite a significant day. It was one Saturday morning. My mum woke me up. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and she said to me, "Oh, Andy, are you sitting down?" I said, "Well, I'm actually, you just woke me up." She said, "Well, your granddad's passed away." And in that moment, I broke down because I'd gone through a very difficult time, and I didn't really tell my parents about what was going on. So it was, I remember breaking down, and then a couple of days later, it was just this inner knowing that mediumship was the right way forward for me. Really, when I look back into my childhood, mediumship was always a part of my life in a kind of indirect way. My mum used to have people come round to do private sittings. She used to have like these parties of people from the family and friends, and the idea of spirit communication was always sort of in the background, as it were. And after my grandfather passed away, and around that same time, that I had that sort of knowing within me, and it was more than just a thought. It was a real conviction that this is something I can do. And I had no real evidence of it, or there's nothing in my past that said I could do this. It was just this real conviction. So when I moved back to Birmingham just after my granddad passed away, I started to investigate mediumship, and I happened upon a small spiritualist church that was just 10 minutes from where my mum and dad lived. And the same as what happened with that meditation center, I just happened to go there on a Thursday evening, and it was their open circle. And the woman, her name is Glennis Owen, who's running the circle, she invited everyone to sit and meditate. So I was quite comfortable with that. I've been doing it for a year or so. And after the meditation, she said to me, "Well, you sat really well." And I said, "Well, I've been doing this a while," meaning in meditation, not mediumship. And then she said, "Okay, well, then you can do a contact." I said, "Well, what do you mean? What's a contact?" And she said, "Well, you're going to do it." So I stood up, and I didn't really know what to do or how to do it. But in that moment, I remember this contact more than any other contact I've ever given. It was the very first experience. There was about 20 people there in the circle, and I just was drawn to this woman. And I said, "Your nephew's passed away?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "He passed in a car accident. He was in a red Ford Fiesta, and the car left the road and hit a tree, and he passed away." And she said, "Yes." And I said, "It's his birthday today." And she said, "Well, how do you know that?" I said, "Well, in your living room, there's a bay window, and in the front of the bay window, there's a table, and you've got a picture of him on the table. And before you left tonight, you lit a candle and wished him happy birthday, and you came here." And she broke down in tears. And that was the very first contact that I'd ever given without any training. The first stage in the development that I've learned is it, everyone, you can't underestimate the importance of sitting in the power of your own soul. And what I've come to realize later on is that although I started off with mindfulness meditation, as I developed that practice by myself, my mind was naturally moving to the spirit world and building a relationship with that world as well. And it's really through that process, which takes a varying amount of time depending on the person. That's what really brings everything to the surface and brings that mediumistic quality to the surface. And once it's on the surface, then it can be expressed. But the first task, and that's what I went through in that 2-year period in Sheffield, is really getting to know the self. And by doing that, it then it activates that mediumistic quality and brings it to right to the surface, and then it can be worked with.
Why do you think mediumship is so important, and what role do you think that it plays in our lives?
For me, the importance of mediumship is to act as a catalyst for change in this world. You know, often people think mediumship and spiritualism is all about death, but it's actually about life itself. And what I think the role of the medium is that by providing these communications from the spirit world, what we're actually pointing out to people is this immortal nature of our own self, the reality of the soul, and the mediumship, if you like, it starts to plant a seed, which then within the mind of the individual begins to grow and causes them to start to look at the very nature of who they are as a person. And of course, that naturally then leads one to start looking within and to go on their own personal spiritual journey, in which we hope that they will find the true calling and the true purpose and expression of their own soul, so that they can live a life in harmony with the qualities and the purpose of what why they've been born. And that's the important thing. You know, mediumship, and it sounds kind of a bit 60s and a bit hippie, but mediumship is a power, a form of communication through which a spiritual revolution can emerge. That is a world in which people are living much more in harmony with the spiritual quality of them, rather than following the money all the time. And that journey is what enriches us, and really what gives meaning and imbues meaning into one's life. And that's the task of the medium. Yes, to be a balm of consolation for those that have lost somebody, and to be a healing balm in that sense. But the greater message of the medium and of mediumship is the task that we all have to go through in life, which is to find that true expression within. And we've got this unique opportunity, and perhaps the only opportunity that we'll ever have, to be able to manifest that kind of spark of perfection that lies within, to be able to manifest perfection within an imperfect world. And that's a unique position to be in, and that's really why I think life is so beautiful.
That's a really beautiful way of explaining it. But what about from the spirit's perspective, from the spirit world? What sort of role does it play from their point of view?
When we begin to explore what the nature of the soul is, what we realize is that we have, on this soul level, at the very essence of ourselves, we have certain desires, and those desires can be moral desires, intellectual desires. They can also be spiritual desires. But there is also the overwhelming power that runs throughout the universe, is that power of love. And of course, when we love someone, and we truly love them, then we are connected. And part of what it is to be fulfilled as a human being is not in the material things, but actually in the human relationships that we share with other people. And of course, it's that relationship that endures physical death. And so for the spirit world, that communication process gives the spirit world a unique window and a unique opportunity to be able to share and express and be fulfilled through that communication, in the same way that we are from here. You know, I don't really make any difference or create any difference between what I feel like now and the way that I am as a person, and the way that I feel about life and I feel about people in my life. I think that when I pass away, that transition to the spirit world is just a continuation of the inner life that I experience now. So, you know, when I have a contact from the spirit world or my loved ones come, it uplifts me. It gives me a sense of fulfillment within that moment, and it gives me an experience that enriches me indefinitely. And I think that's just exactly the same as what it is for those in the spirit world. You know, those in the spirit world are still human beings, just a human being without a physical body. But again, if I ask you who you are, you're not going to say to me, well, I'm a head, 2 arms, a torso and 2 legs. You're going to talk to me about your inner life, the way you feel, the way the essence of the way that you are, and how these experiences in life affect you. And that's what it is to be human. And of course, it's that essence of the self, the soul, that is surviving. And so the experiences, the way that we feel, the way that we interact with people is exactly the same. You know, not through the spoken word or through the physical action, but simply through that emotion of the soul.
So, Andy, in a situation where you are connecting with, you know, a past loved one, one-on-one, or even in a demonstration, what actually happens from the spirit side? Like, what happens in the spirit world to make it all come together?
I think there's many different ingredients that enable a communication to take place. But I think one of the interesting points, I think, is, and this is where I think lots of people have got it wrong, is that we are conditioned to believe as mediums that we are receiving information. And of course, implicit in that idea of receiving is this sense that the spirit world is giving us our experience. So, you know, if there's an image of a watch, for instance, that's triggered within the medium's mind, we have this sense that the spirit world has given us that they've sort of projected it into our minds. And I don't really believe that's how it works. The right way to think about it is that we are becoming aware of something. What I really believe is happening, of course, is that the spirit person is having to change their state of mind, you know, the vibration of their own soul, to move closer to the medium. And essentially what the mediumistic process is, it's a coming together of 2 souls. And this is what when we talk about blending, that's what we're talking about, is this coming together. And I think quite a lot of people don't quite understand the word blending or what it really means. And I think the best way to explain it is to give you a sort of visual image. If you imagine you have a glass of water and you have a droplet of ink, black ink, and you drop the ink into the water, well, what happens slowly is that the ink starts to permeate through the liquid to a point where the water will turn black completely. And that's very much what blending is like. You know, as the medium is moving their mind to the spirit world, and the spirit person is moving their mind closer to the medium's mind, it's like that ink is being dropped into the water for the first time, that there's a coming together of the soul, of the 2 souls, but it's still just on the edge of that power, you know, just in the sense of as the ink just drops into the water. Finally, what will begin to happen is as you begin to surrender to the spirit person, and you begin to really work within the essence of the communicator, the ink falls further and further into the water to a point where the ink is black, and that's the point where the 2 souls, the soul of the medium and the soul of the communicator, come together as one. And I believe the key to it all lies within understanding what the essence of the communicator is. So I've already mentioned that the soul has certain desires, and one of those desires within the communication is this desire to communicate. And we've talked about that just previously, this love that 2 people share, this desire to share in that power once more, is the very power, the very desire that enables the communicator, wills the communicator to communicate. And as with all sort of quasi-mystical experiences, that the experience itself eludes language. That is, that I can't give you a description in words what the essence of a communicator feels like. But what we can do is look at the characteristics that are there when we work with the essence. And as we work with that essence through the emotion of the clairsentience, what you will find is that you'll become aware of that desire, that need to communicate, not just the need of the love to communicate, which is where it all stems from, but what is it within the communicator's life that they need to express. What is it they actually want to say to their loved one? And if you look at life, the way that we live life, everything that we do there's a narrative to that experience. So if I want to express to my son the memories of going fishing together, because that's something so personal and poignant and really, is what made that relationship what it really was. The very experience of fishing together, you'll find there is two elements to that sort of narrative. The first is how I feel as the communicator going fishing, how I interact with my son, how I feel when I'm there on the lakeside with him. And the other part of that narrative is practical information. Where is that lake? What was it like? What did we do? What sort of fish did we catch? Did we go on a boat? Did we go off the shore? But that's what's creating a story, if you like, a narrative about that certain experience. So every desire that's there, every need, the thing that the spirit person needs to express, as we work within that essence of that desire, the essence of the soul in that way, we naturally become aware of those stories, those narratives, those life experiences. And so it isn't the spirit world giving us that information. What's happening is that as they move their mind towards us and we blend, we become aware of those experiences. And the experiences that we become aware of right at the beginning of the communication, the very first impression, will be the experience that the communicator needs to express. Why? Because in that moment of time, that will be the most prominent thing within the energy, within the soul, within the power of the communicator itself. So really, from the spirit world's perspective, all they're doing is the same as we're doing. We're merging together, our souls are. The spirit person is allowing me naturally, without trying, it's just naturally there. It's naturally present within their power. They're allowing me to become aware of their life experiences, and I, as the medium, are naturally becoming aware of their life experiences that they want me to. And as I experience that, and this is the other thing, mediums always think, I think quite often mediums are wanting to observe the spirit world. They want to see everything, and they want to observe that life as though they're watching it on a film in some way. And what we're doing when we do that is we're keeping the spirit world at arm's length. I don't want to observe their life. I want to become them. If you think of the water and the ink, when the ink becomes black, the ink has become part of the water. It's a becoming. That's what it really is. And as we become and we experience those experiences, we relive those experiences of the communicator, however best our soul can make us become consciously aware of those experiences that it is experiencing, the soul is experiencing, is how the mediumistic phenomena will present itself to the medium. So my point is that the spirit world isn't giving us a watch, a picture of a watch. We're becoming aware of that watch, for instance, and in that moment, the easiest way, through the faculty of the imagination, that our soul can make us become consciously aware of what it is actually experiencing, maybe by giving us a picture of a watch, or it may be by giving us a sense of a watch, or it may be a thought word of watch. So they're not giving us that. We're just becoming aware of it, and whatever way it can manifest is the way that it will manifest. And that's really all that is happening. I think it's actually a very simple process. And I think quite often what we try to do is overcomplicate something that is profoundly simple. It isn't the spirit world sitting there kind of thought projecting all these images. And the other thing, and this might be of interest to your listeners, is people often say to me, well, Andy, the experiences that I'm becoming aware of are like my own experiences. And my response is always the same. Every single experience that we have within our mediumship is our own experience. It's been triggered from our subconscious and unconscious minds. And when people often challenge me about that, and I say, well, look, think of it this way, and this is what some of your listeners might have to think about as well, is how many times have you had it where you've had, like, let's say, a dad in the spirit world, and you get this picture of a red Jaguar, and you say, okay, you've got your dad, he had a Jaguar car, and they say yes. Then you say it was a red Jaguar, and they say no. if you was experiencing the actual experience, that picture was the actual experience of that dad's car, then it should be a red Jaguar. If it's not, then the spirit person has either forgotten what colour his car was, which I doubt, or you're not in touch with the spirit world. But often the case, it isn't an actual red Jaguar, it's a Jaguar car, but it's not red. And that's because what's happening is as we're becoming aware of that experience of the Jaguar car, it's triggering an image of a Jaguar car that we've seen that happens to be red, and that's the best way it can manifest. But it's not the actual car of the communicator. So this is why you can't just say what you see and describe your experiences. You have to learn how to use the experience, and you have to understand it in the context of that particular narrative that you're developing within the communication.
So I guess, Andy, that means, you know, for developing mediums that want to improve their connection, emotion has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the emotion is at the center of the whole communication process. The blending of the two souls occurs through the emotion, and it's through that blending, which takes its origin in the emotion itself. It's through the blending and the sensing that we begin to see, hear, and feel. And in fact, what we see and what we hear are just different manifestations of the emotion that we're experiencing. And this is where, you know, lots of people, they want to develop practical evidence and they think that they have to see it all. Whereas actually what we have to do is to realize that the emotion, we can use the emotion in different ways. And people often think that, okay, well, emotion means becoming aware of happiness or becoming aware of depression or so on. That's one way that emotion can manifest within ourselves. But the other way that that emotion manifests is through a sensing. So that is all part of the emotional facet of the clairsentience. So rather than wanting to see a person working under a car, hood of a car, working on an engine, we want to be reliving that experience, as I've said. We want to sense and feel that we want to roll our sleeves up and go under a car and work on an engine. We haven't got to see everything. In fact, you know, I think as my mediumship has matured over the years, I see very little now. There's more this sense of knowing, and that sense of knowing comes from using the emotion in different ways. It's actually where that knowing is where we're seeing, hearing, and feeling all at the same time. We're actually sensing, and we're reliving the communication. And really, when you think about mediumship, and if you think about your own mediumship, everyone can do this. It doesn't matter what level of experience you have. When you allow yourself to simply surrender to that power, and you allow yourself, through that surrendering, to become the communicator, you haven't got to be taught anything. It just happens. I mentioned to you that very first experience I ever had within my mediumship. No, I had no training whatsoever. It just happened. Because in that moment, for whatever reason, I allowed myself to truly surrender and become part of the communicator. And when I look back at that experience, I didn't see anything. I didn't feel anything. I just knew. And that's because I'm seeing, feeling, and hearing all at the same time. Now, that's the state that we're trying to achieve consistently all of the time. That's mediumship at its best and just happens naturally. What we have to remember is that we can't always achieve that state, and that this idea of surrendering, where you allow the spirit communicator to lead the communication and we simply follow that communicator. There's certain things that will stop us from surrendering, because as soon as we start taking control of the contact, that is where the medium tries to lead the communication rather than follow the communicator, that blending will start to not come together. It will start to move apart. And when within that state of surrender, it's not, okay, I've surrendered or I've not surrendered. We surrender by degrees. And during a communication, at every moment during a communication, the degree to which the medium is surrendering and becoming will change. It's not like we're there now. It's actually more like this. It moves. And so there will be certain moments when there will be this knowing because we've become in that moment and we're now experiencing. And then there'll be other times, for whatever reason, that we're surrendering to a lesser degree, even within the same communication. And at that moment, when we begin to surrender to that lesser degree, I believe that's then when we begin these experiences, that, you know, these visual experiences we have, these aural experience of hearing things, these emotional experiences, they begin to separate themselves. We begin to become aware of a prominent part of the experience. So we'll see a picture because that's the most prominent part of it. And we have to learn how to work with our mediumship when that true state of surrender can't be achieved. And we do that through formal training, we do that through meditation practice, and we do that through experience. But the biggest thing is that what's often the case is it's nothing within the mediumship itself that's hindering that state of surrender. It's what's within the medium. It's the internal life of the medium themselves, their own fears, their insecurities. And that's why we have to, when we're talking about emotion and working with emotion, mediumship isn't about, mediumship's actually about mastering the self. You know, the emotions that we have to master aren't the spirit world's emotions. It's our own. Just to put that in some context very quickly, if I blend with the communicator and I become aware of depression within a communicator, say a mom that suffers from depression, as I blend with that soul, I become aware of that depression. The person's emotions triggers an emotion within my soul, which I then become aware of. So although that depression that I become aware of in the moment is triggered by the communicator, it's actually my own depression that I'm experiencing, an emotion that I've experienced at some point in my life. And some people say, well, I've not ever experienced depression. Well, you might not have had manic depression, but we've all felt low. And it might just be that sense of feeling low that is triggered. So when we're working with emotions, there's two things that happen a lot of the time with mediums in those moments. That is, the first thing is that an emotion is triggered. They don't understand what that emotion means. So it's triggered, they just don't know what it is. And secondly, they know what the emotion is, but they can't quite find the right words to articulate how they feel. Now, if you agree with what I'm talking about, and you see it from this perspective, then if the medium, if emotions are being triggered within the medium and they don't know what it means that there's emotions that the medium possesses, that they've experienced and have within them, that they don't understand what they are. If there's emotions that come where they understand what they are, but they can't find the right words to articulate them, it's telling us that there's certain emotions within ourselves that we haven't yet found the words to express. And so to master the mediumship is to master oneself. Really, most students spend, when I see students all year, you know, every year, they spend 90% of their time trying to develop their technical mediumship and 10% of their time looking at themselves. They have to do the opposite. It should be 90% about developing and perfecting us, and then the mediumship takes care of itself. And I'm a living testament to that. I spent 2 years really understanding my emotions and learning how to express them. And when I came to my very first experience, it just happened. And that isn't because I'm special. It's because I'd started to get to know myself. So really, the sort of best piece of advice when we're talking about working with mediums, or working with our mediumship, is this: the weaknesses within your mediumship are merely a reflection of the weaknesses within yourself. So if you want to strengthen your mediumship, don't go looking outside for help, of technical help. That's part of it, but a very small part of it. You've got to look within and develop the qualities that lie there. I mean, when students say to me, and they've got, I don't have confidence in my mediumship, or I'm not trusting my experiences, and this is not, it's not a harsh response, but it's a response that goes right to the heart of the problem, which is simple. Have you accepted that you are a medium? Because what I find happens a lot of the time with students, particularly those in the early part of the development. But if this isn't dealt with and nipped in the bud early on, you'll find that insecurity will continue throughout the whole of their mediumistic expression for years to come, which is the very first stage, as I've mentioned, is that we have to look within and actually experience the quality and potential of the mediumship that is within. And this is what I believe happened to me in that moment when I woke up that morning, and I had this deep conviction that I could communicate with the spirit world. This quality was there within me. That was the moment when the mediumship broke the surface and I became conscious of that aspect of myself. And if we haven't lived that experience, that quality within, to that point that we know it's present, we're always going to have an issue with confidence. Because what is the real issue? It's always, the issue is always, in my experience of teaching, am I in touch with the spirit world or am I not in touch with the spirit world? Which actually, ergo, am I a medium or am I not a medium? So the heart of the problem is always accepting that we are. And what I find happens within seminars and training programs is that when students do exercises, so you set them an exercise and you say to them at the end, how did it go? The majority of the time, the response is always, yeah, it was great, I did really well. Or, no, it was rubbish because I've struggled. Now, what that tells me, or what I've come to kind of take from that, is that when people look at their mediumship in terms of the results of exercises, it's telling me that they're having an internal battle within themselves. That is, that when the exercise goes well, I am a medium. When they struggle, oh, maybe I'm not. That insecurity comes, which is telling me they haven't yet fully accepted that they are a medium. Because if you know you're a medium, because you've lived that experience and you know that quality is there within, regardless of the results that you have in an exercise, shouldn't take away from the fact and the conviction that I am a medium. And it's only when we have that conviction that we can develop the confidence. Because if you go looking, because what we always tend to do as humans is that when we're insecure about something, what do? We seek approval, we seek reassurance from others. Was that good? Yeah. Oh, that was great. Yeah, you're fantastic. Oh, well. And then you build a confidence and you feel, oh God, I feel good. Then all of a sudden you'll have a difficult experience with the spirit world. And that confidence that you've built is a false confidence and it collapses. And then rather than using those dark moments to look within and use it to propel them to find that quality within, they either quit their mediumship, or they work even harder at doing more practice to try and build up a false sense of security and a false sense of confidence again. If you haven't got that conviction, that you haven't accepted that you are a medium, then it's not really, you can't become the medium. And what we've got to ask ourselves is, how much evidence do we need? For me, it was that one experience that I had, the very first experience I had, was enough for me to know, well, I'm in touch with the spirit world. And there was one other experience I had where my father asked me to do a sitting for his work colleague. And I did a sitting for her. And I started off, and this is actually good, I think, a good example, because it kind of encapsulates everything that I've been talking about. I started this sitting with her, and I said, got your auntie, I remember this one as well, actually, quite well. Got your auntie here. Her name was Rose. She lived in Wales. Her husband died in a mining accident. The mining shaft fell on top of him, and he died. And for every response that I had, she was saying no. So after I said that, I said, well, I'm going to say this to you. I said, look, obviously the sitting hasn't worked. So, let's call it a day. And we went our separate ways. Now, after that sitting, I thought, oh, something's not gone, something's not worked. But I didn't then start to question if I'm a medium or not. I just, okay, this is a experience that I haven't understood. Now, unbeknownst to us both, her dad is actually, what do you call them now? that he looks at the family tree. So I'm not a genealogist. Is that right? Is that
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yep.
Genealogist. So on that same day and roughly around the same time that we were having that sitting, her dad had been doing some research into the family, and it was like it would be like, I might have got the relationship not quite right. Wasn't there a direct auntie, but it was in that sort of going back in time, what would be a distant auntie. He found this information and some birth certificates and death certificates about two people, one of whom was Rose, who lived in Wales in a mining village, and her husband's death certificate was that he was a miner and died in a mining accident. So that experience taught me, well, look, the recipient didn't know that information. No one actually knew that at that point in time. No one knew that. The only person that knew that was her dad, who was, miles away from, didn't even live in Birmingham where I'm from. So that can't have been psychic, because the recipient had no knowledge of that. And yet the spirit world knew that what her dad was doing, knew that that information was being uncovered, and then responded to that knowledge, which shows there's a third intelligence that we're working with. When we start to train our mediumship, then we're not having this internal battle within ourselves. We can look at the experiences that we're having, and rather than judging them on their merits in terms of how well we've done and how well we've performed, we can start looking at what we've learned. And that's the important thing from every exercise. Lots of students, and I'm rambling on a little bit here, but lots of students always, wonder why when they go to seminars it's so difficult. It's because by going to a seminar, you're saying to the spirit world, let's work, let's train, let's try new things, let's experiment, work, let's understand each other more. And so in those exercises, it's not about your performance, it's actually about what can you learn. And some of those experiences are going to be new, they're not going to work. The spirit will not be experimenting in different ways with us, and it doesn't work on their side. We're going to be trying new things and new ways of looking at our mediumship and working. So it might not work from our side, but it's not about your performance. It's about what we can take from that to take on to our next experience. And when we haven't accepted ourselves as mediums, not only do we not trust, not only do we keep having this internal battle and this insecurity, but we don't actually take away from the experiences that we do have the valuable things that can help us to develop and move forward as mediums.
I think that's going to help a lot of developing mediums. That's probably the best explanation of how to overcome that fear I've heard. Okay, Andy, well, I'm sure people are going to want to contact you and connect with you maybe for some online workshops and training seminars, or even in person with your demonstrations. How will they find out what you have on?
All of my online seminars and in-person seminars are on my website, which is at www.andybyng.com. That's BYNG. Or you'll find Facebook posts on my Facebook page, which again, just type in Andy Byng in Facebook and you'll find me there too. Thanks
again, Andy. It's been great talking to you, and I'm sure we'll talk again.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And for everyone out there, just enjoy your mediumship, have fun with it, and look within and find yourself. That's the main thing. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye-bye.